The certified letter in my mailbox might as well have been a declaration of war, and I knew exactly who had sent it before I even tore open the envelope. I stood there on my front porch in Asheville, North Carolina, reading the most absurd thing I had seen in my 38 years of life. The Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association was fining me $500 for unauthorized landscaping modifications that violate community aesthetic standards. My crime: planting 6 oak saplings along my property line. 6 innocent trees that would one day provide shade and beauty to a lot that desperately needed both. My name is Marcus Yates, and I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates 8 months ago after my divorce finalized. The neighborhood seemed peaceful enough during my initial visits, a collection of modest homes built in the early 2000s, nestled against a gorgeous stretch of forest land. That forest had actually been one of the main selling points for me. I loved nature, loved the idea of morning coffee while watching deer graze at the tree line, loved the privacy it provided from the neighboring development on the other side. What I did not love was Patricia Henderson. Patricia was the HOA president, a woman in her mid-50s with a blonde bob that never moved in the wind and a perpetual expression like she had just caught someone littering on her lawn. She had introduced herself the day I moved in, showing up with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Guidelines and Regulations Handbook, she called it. I should have known then what I was in for. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she had said, though her smile never reached her eyes. "I'm sure you'll find we run a very tight ship here. Quality of life is our #1 priority." I had thanked her, set the binder on my kitchen counter, and promptly forgot about it as I unpacked. That was mistake #1. Now, standing here with this ridiculous fine in my hands, I felt my blood pressure rising. I had checked the guidelines before planting those trees. Well, I had skimmed them. There was nothing about trees specifically, just vague language about maintaining visual harmony with neighboring properties. My saplings were neat, properly spaced, and native species. They were probably the best thing to happen to my property. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the letter. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, Patricia Henderson speaking." "Patricia, this is Marcus Yates from 47 Oak Ridge Drive. I just received a fine for planting trees on my own property." "Oh yes, Mr. Yates." Her voice took on that condescending tone that made my jaw clench. "I drove by your home yesterday and noticed the unauthorized plantings. The HOA board met this morning and voted unanimously to issue the fine. The trees are on my property, well within my lot lines. I checked the guidelines and there is nothing prohibiting native tree plantings. Section 4.7 clearly states that any exterior modifications must be submitted to the Architectural Review Committee for approval. You failed to do so." I walked inside and grabbed the binder from the shelf where it had been gathering dust. I flipped to Section 4.7. This section is about exterior home modifications, paint colors, additions, that kind of thing. Trees are landscaping. Trees are exterior modifications, Mr. Yates. They change the visual appearance of the property. By that logic, I would need permission to plant flowers. Section 6.3, subsection B, all flower beds must be approved if they exceed 20 square feet. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Patricia, this is absurd. They are just trees." "Rules are rules. The fine is due within 30 days. If you remove the trees and submit a formal landscaping plan for approval, the board might consider reducing the penalty." She paused. "Might. I'm not removing the trees." "Then I suggest you pay the fine. And Mr. Yates, if those trees are not removed, the fine will increase by $250 every month they remain." Good day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my living room staring at my phone in disbelief. This could not be legal. I had bought this house, paid a mortgage, owned the land. Some neighborhood busybody could not tell me I could not plant trees. I spent the rest of that afternoon doing research. Unfortunately, I learned that HOAs in North Carolina had quite a bit of power. The guidelines I had agreed to when I purchased the home were legally binding. My lawyer, a friend from college named Tom, confirmed this when I called him. "You signed the covenant agreement at closing," Tom said. "Technically, they can enforce it. Whether this specific fine would hold up in court is another question, but fighting it would cost you more in legal fees than just paying. So I'm supposed to just bend over and take it. You could try appealing to the board directly. Show up at their next meeting, make your case to the other homeowners. Sometimes these petty tyrants back down when confronted publicly." It was not a great option, but it was something. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, 3 days away. I marked it on my calendar and tried to focus on work. I did software consulting from home, which usually meant I could ignore neighborhood drama. Usually, Tuesday morning, I woke up to find a new letter taped to my front door. This one informed me that my grass was a 1/4 inch too long and needed to be mowed within 72 hours or face an additional $200 fine. I had mowed it 5 days ago. It looked perfect. I took photos, documented the grass height with a measuring tape, and added it to my growing file of HOA nonsense. Patricia was clearly escalating because I had pushed back. This was going to get worse before it got better. Wednesday afternoon, I was on a video call with a client when I noticed Patricia walking down my driveway. I watched through my window as she took photos of my house from multiple angles, made notes on a clipboard, and then examined my mailbox like it might contain explosives. I excused myself from the call and went outside. "Can I help you with something, Patricia?" She did not even have the decency to look embarrassed at being caught. "Just my monthly property inspection, making sure all homes are in compliance. Monthly inspection of private property. Community standards don't maintain themselves, Mr. Yates." She made another note. "Your house numbers are faded. Section 8.2 requires clearly visible addressing. I'll add that to your violation list." I looked at my house numbers. They were fine, maybe a tiny bit faded from sun exposure, but perfectly readable from the street. "You have got to be kidding me." "I never kid about community standards." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there wondering if this was what a stroke felt like. Thursday evening could not come fast enough. The HOA meeting was held at Patricia's house, because of course it was. I arrived at 7 sharp, carrying a folder with my property survey, photos of the trees, and a printed copy of the guidelines with my sections highlighted. About 15 other homeowners were scattered around Patricia's living room, most looking like they would rather be anywhere else. I recognized a few neighbors I had waved to in passing but never really talked to. Patricia sat at the head of the room in a wingback chair that might as well have been a throne, with her vice president beside her, a mousy woman named Deborah, who seemed to exist solely to agree with everything Patricia said. "Let's call this meeting to order," Patricia announced, banging a gavel that was completely unnecessary. "First item on the agenda, approval of last month's minutes." I sat through 20 minutes of the most mind-numbing bureaucratic nonsense I had ever witnessed. They discussed the font size on the community newsletter. They debated whether the 4th of July picnic should have hamburgers or hot dogs. They voted on a motion to send a thank you card to the garbage collection company. Finally, Patricia got to new business. "We have a resident appeal tonight. Mr. Yates wishes to address the board regarding his recent violation fine." All eyes turned to me. I stood up, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. Thank you for hearing me out. I'm appealing the fine for planting 6 oak saplings on my property. I believe this fine is unjustified for several reasons. First, the trees are native species that will enhance property values. Second, they're entirely on my lot and don't encroach on any common areas. Third, the guidelines section being cited applies to structural modifications, not landscaping. I'm asking the board to rescind the fine and approve the trees. I sat down. A few people nodded. That seemed like a good sign. Patricia cleared her throat. The Architectural Review Committee has clear authority over all exterior modifications. Your failure to submit the proper forms before planting shows a blatant disregard for our community standards. I wasn't aware trees required approval, I said. The language in the guidelines is ambiguous at best. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse, Mr. Yates. A man across the room raised his hand. I've got a question. I planted some shrubs last year and nobody said anything. What's the difference? Patricia's expression tightened. Were they approved, Gerald? Well, no, but nobody fined me. Then we'll have to review your property as well. Gerald's face fell. I felt bad for dragging him into this, but at least I was not alone in thinking this was ridiculous. Another woman spoke up. Patricia, don't you think $500 is a bit steep for some trees? Maybe we could just have him submit the paperwork now and waive the fine. The fine structure was approved by the board last year, Sharon. We can't show favoritism. I wasn't on the board last year, Sharon said. I didn't approve anything like that. Well, the previous board did. I saw an opening. Could I see the meeting minutes where that fine structure was approved? I'd like to understand the rationale. Patricia's face flushed slightly. I don't have them with me. Could you email them to me? I'll have to check with our secretary. Deborah, the vice president, piped up. I don't remember us ever voting on specific fine amounts. The room got quiet. Patricia shot Deborah a look that could have melted steel. We can discuss our internal procedures later. Right now, we're voting on Mr. Yates's appeal, all in favor of upholding the fine. Patricia and 2 other board members raised their hands, 3 out of 5. All opposed. Deborah and the 5th board member raised their hands. The appeal is denied. Mr. Yates, your fine stands. Next item on the agenda. I could not believe it. I stood up again. This is not over. I'm going to consult with my attorney about the legality of these fines. That's your right, Patricia said coldly. But until a court tells us otherwise, our rules stand. And Mr. Yates, your grass is still too long. I suggest you mow it before Saturday or face additional penalties. I left the meeting furious. Several people stopped me on the way out to apologize quietly, saying Patricia had been getting worse over the past year, but nobody wanted to rock the boat. Cowards, all of them. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the smug look on Patricia's face, the way she wielded her petty power like a weapon. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to get some water and found myself looking at an old file box I had not opened since the move. My grandfather had passed away 5 years ago, leaving me a few family heirlooms and some paperwork I had never fully gone through. Most of it was old tax documents and such, but I remembered there being some property deeds in there from land he had owned around North Carolina. I pulled out the box and started sorting through it. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, stock certificates that were probably worthless now, and then, at the bottom, a manila envelope labeled Asheville Property. Inside was a deed dated 1987. According to the document, my grandfather had purchased 150 acres of forest land on the outskirts of Asheville. The legal description meant nothing to me, just a bunch of survey coordinates and lot numbers. I pulled up the county GIS mapping system on my laptop and entered the parcel number from the deed. The map loaded. I zoomed in on the highlighted property boundary. My hands started shaking. The 150 acres my grandfather had owned was the forest directly behind Meadowbrook Estates. The same forest I looked at every morning from my back deck. The same forest that provided the privacy and natural beauty that made this neighborhood desirable. The same forest where, according to the community newsletter I had glanced at once, the HOA held their annual summer picnic every July. I started laughing. I could not help it. The irony was too perfect. I spent the rest of the night and most of Friday researching. The deed was legitimate, recorded with the county, and taxes had been paid automatically from my grandfather's estate account for years after his death. When the estate finally closed, the automatic payments stopped, but I discovered the county had sent the tax bills to my parents' house, and my mother had been paying them without really thinking about it, just filing it under Grandpa's affairs and writing a check twice a year. The land was mine. Legally, clearly, indisputably mine. I called Tom, my lawyer friend, first thing Friday morning. "You're absolutely sure about this?" he asked after I explained everything. "I've got the deed right here. I checked with the county register. It's legitimate. And the HOA has been using this land for events. According to their newsletter, they've held their annual picnic there for the past 8 years. They call it the Meadowbrook Forest Preserve. They seem to think it's public land or something." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, this is a property rights violation. You could sue them for trespass, but that seems extreme. What are you thinking? I want leverage. Patricia is making my life hell over 6 trees. I want her to back off. Be careful. You're talking about playing hardball with someone who seems pretty vindictive. She started it." Tom sighed. "Let me do some research on your options. Don't do anything rash until we talk again." I agreed, but I was already forming a plan. Saturday morning, I went to the county administration building and got certified copies of the deed and property survey. I also requested copies of any permits the HOA might have filed for use of the land. There were none. They had just been using it, probably for years, without ever checking who owned it. The annual Meadowbrook Estates summer picnic was scheduled for July 12th, about 6 weeks away. I had time to prepare. First, though, I needed to deal with Patricia's immediate harassment. I spent Saturday afternoon meticulously mowing my lawn, trimming it to exactly 2 inches, the middle of the acceptable range according to the guidelines. I took photos with a measuring tape visible, time-stamped and geo-tagged. I touched up my house numbers with fresh paint. I documented everything. Monday morning, Tom called me back. "Okay, I've looked into this. The land is definitely yours. The HOA has no legal right to use it without your permission. If you want to prohibit their access, you can do that. What about the picnic? You could let them know now that they can't use it. Or you could wait until they show up and then deny them access, but that seems needlessly dramatic. What if I offered them a deal? They drop all my fines and stop harassing me, and I'll let them continue using the forest. That could work. You'd want it in writing, though. A formal agreement that protects you from future HOA actions. Can you draft something? Sure. But Marcus, consider whether you really want to stay in this neighborhood. This is going to make you enemy number 1. Patricia already made me that. I'm just evening the playing field." Tom said he would have something drafted by Wednesday. In the meantime, I decided to do a little reconnaissance. Tuesday afternoon, I drove to the forest access point the HOA used. There was a gravel path leading from the end of Maple Street, one of the Meadowbrook Estates roads, into the woods. About a quarter mile in, there was a clearing with picnic tables, a fire pit, and a covered pavilion, All of it was on my property. I took photos of everything, noting that the structures had been built without my permission. The pavilion alone probably cost thousands of dollars. I wondered if HOA dues had paid for it or if they had fundraised. Either way, they had improved someone else's property without permission. Wednesday evening, Tom emailed me a draft agreement. It was simple. In exchange for a permanent easement allowing Meadowbrook Estates, HOA access to the forest area for community events, the HOA would rescind all current fines against me, agree not to impose future fines related to my tree plantings, and revise their guidelines to clarify what landscaping did and did not require pre-approval. It was fair, more than fair, considering I could have just kicked them off my land entirely. I printed 3 copies and put them in a folder. Then I drafted an email to Patricia. Dear Mrs. Henderson, I would like to schedule a meeting with the HOA board to discuss a matter of mutual interest regarding the Meadowbrook Forest Preserve. Please let me know when the full board can meet. This is time sensitive given the upcoming summer picnic. Regards, Marcus Yates. She responded within an hour. Mr. Yates, the board schedule is quite full. If you have concerns about the community picnic, you can submit them in writing for consideration at next month's meeting. I replied immediately. This concerns property rights and legal access to the forest. I strongly suggest we meet before the picnic. I'm available any evening this week. 20 minutes passed. Then my phone rang. Patricia, what exactly are you implying about property rights? Her voice was tight. I'd prefer to discuss this in person with the full board present. When can you meet? Friday evening, 7 o'clock, my house. I'd prefer a neutral location. How about the pavilion in the forest? There was a long pause. Fine, 7 o'clock Friday at the pavilion. See you then. I hung up and allowed myself a smile. She was worried. Good. Friday evening, I arrived at the pavilion at 6:45, wanting to be there first. The forest was beautiful in the early summer evening, sunlight filtering through the trees, birds singing. It really was a perfect spot for a picnic. I understood why they used it. Patricia arrived at exactly 7, along with Deborah and the 3 other board members. They all looked nervous except Patricia, who had her armor of righteous indignation firmly in place. Well, Mr. Yates, what's this about? I laid the folder on one of the picnic tables. I recently discovered that I own this land. All 150 acres of forest surrounding Meadowbrook Estates, inherited from my grandfather. Patricia's face went white. The other board members started talking at once. That's impossible, Patricia said. This is public land. It's not. I have the deed right here along with the county survey. You're welcome to review them. I handed her the documents. She scanned them, her hands shaking slightly. This has to be a mistake. It's not. I've confirmed it with the county. The property is mine and has been in my family since 1987. You've been using it without permission. We've been using this land for years. We built this pavilion, maintained the trails, cleaned up the area on my property without my authorization. One of the other board members, a man named Richard, spoke up. Look, if there's been a misunderstanding about ownership, I'm sure we can work something out. The community loves this space. I'm aware, which is why I'm prepared to offer you a solution. I pulled out the agreement Tom had drafted. This is an easement agreement. I'll grant the HOA permanent access to this area for community events in exchange for 3 things. First, all fines against me are rescinded immediately. Second, the HOA agrees not to impose any future fines related to my tree plantings. Third, the architectural guidelines are revised to clearly define what landscaping requires pre-approval, with a presumption that native plantings under 20 feet tall are automatically approved. I handed copies to each board member. They read in silence. "This is blackmail," Patricia said. "It's negotiation. I'm the property owner. I could simply prohibit all access and have the pavilion removed as an illegal structure. Instead, I'm offering you a way to keep using the space. The terms are reasonable." Sharon, one of the board members who had seemed sympathetic at the previous meeting, nodded slowly. "This seems fair, Patricia. We were in the wrong using his land without permission. We didn't know it was his land." "Ignorance of property ownership is not an excuse," I said, throwing her own words back at her. "Isn't that what you told me about the guidelines?" Patricia's jaw clenched so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. "The board needs to discuss this privately. You have until July 11th. That's the day before the picnic. If I don't have a signed agreement by then, I'll be posting no trespassing signs and securing the property. Your picnic will need a new venue." "You can't do this." "I absolutely can. It's my land." Richard cleared his throat. "Could you give us a few minutes, Mr. Yates?" I nodded and walked about 50 yards away, far enough to give them privacy but close enough to watch their body language. Patricia was gesturing angrily, clearly arguing. The other 4 board members seemed less confrontational, passing around the agreement and discussing it calmly. After about 10 minutes, Richard waved me back over. "We'd like to accept your terms with one modification. We'd like the easement to include access for individual residents to use the trails, not just for organized HOA events." That seemed reasonable. "Fine. I'll have my attorney add that language. Anything else?" Patricia looked like she had been sucking on lemons. "This is extortion." "No, Patricia, this is property rights. You've been trespassing on my land and fining me for exercising my rights on my own lot. This agreement protects both of us going forward." Sharon spoke up. "I think we should accept. This is more than fair considering the situation." "I agree," said Richard. The other board member, a woman named Helen, nodded as well. Deborah looked at Patricia, then at the others, then down at the table. "I agree too." Patricia was outvoted and she knew it. "Fine, but I want it on record that I oppose this coercion." "Noted," Richard said. "Mr. Yates, have your attorney make that revision and we'll sign it." I nodded. "I'll have a final version to you by Monday. If the full board signs it by Wednesday, we'll have everything settled before the picnic." As they walked away, Patricia turned back. "You think you've won something here, but you've made an enemy of this entire board." "You made an enemy of me first," I said quietly. "I just wanted to plant some trees." That weekend, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Tom revised the agreement to include trail access for residents, and I emailed it to the board Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I had received a scanned copy with all 5 board signatures, along with a terse email from Patricia confirming that my fines had been rescinded. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Thursday morning, I found another letter taped to my door. This one was from the County Code Enforcement Office, stating that my property had been reported for multiple violations including overgrown vegetation, junk storage visible from the street, and an unpermitted structure. I looked around my property in disbelief. My lawn was immaculate. I had no junk anywhere, and I definitely had not built any structures. I called the code enforcement number and spoke with an officer named Miguel Santos. "I received a violation notice, but there's nothing wrong with my property. Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" "Complaints can be filed anonymously, sir, but I do need to come out and inspect based on the report we received." "When can you come?" "I can be there this afternoon around 2 if you're available. I'll be here." Officer Santos arrived right on time, a middle-aged Hispanic man with a clipboard and a camera. I walked him around the property. "Your lawn looks fine to me," he said, making notes. I don't see any junk storage. What structure was supposedly unpermitted? I have no idea. I haven't built anything. He checked his notes. The complaint mentioned a shed or outbuilding in the backyard. I walked him to my backyard. There was no shed. There was nothing but my deck and the tree line. Sir, I don't know what to tell you. This complaint appears to be completely unfounded. I'll file a report stating no violations were found. Can you tell me anything about who filed it? Even general information? He hesitated. I'm not supposed to, but between you and me, the complaint came in through our online form. The IP address was traced to a residential location in your neighborhood. Someone's got it out for you. I know exactly who. After he left, I checked my security camera footage. I had installed cameras after Patricia started harassing me just to protect myself. Wednesday evening, around 9 p.m., a figure in dark clothing had walked up my driveway and taken photos of my house with a flash. The person was too far away and too bundled up to identify clearly, but the height and build looked like Patricia. I saved the footage and sent it to Tom. She's escalating. Filed a false code enforcement complaint. What are my options? Tom called me within an hour. False complaints to government agencies can be considered harassment. If you can prove she did it, you could file for a restraining order or sue for harassment. I want to try something else first. I drove to the county planning office and requested public records for any recent complaints or permit applications related to the Meadowbrook Estates area. It took a few hours, but what I found was interesting. Patricia had filed complaints against 17 different properties in the neighborhood over the past 2 years. Most were dismissed as unfounded. She had also filed numerous permit applications for improvements to the community forest area, all of which had been denied because she could not prove ownership or authorization from the owner. She had been trying to claim my forest for the HOA for years. I made copies of everything and created a timeline. Patricia's harassment of residents had increased significantly after she became HOA president 18 months ago. Before that, the neighborhood had relatively few complaints or fines. Under her leadership, fine revenue had increased by 400%. I brought this to the next HOA meeting, the first Tuesday in July. The meeting was better attended than usual. Word had spread about the forest ownership situation, and people were curious. I waited until the public comment period. I'd like to address the pattern of harassment coming from this board, specifically from President Henderson. Patricia's eyes narrowed. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Yates. It's documented. I distributed copies of my research to everyone in the room. In the 18 months since you became president, Patricia, fines against residents have increased 400%. You've filed false complaints with county code enforcement against multiple neighbors. You've consistently abused your position to harass people over minor or non-existent violations. The room erupted in conversation. Several people started sharing their own stories of Patricia's overreach. I got fined because my trash can was visible from the street for 4 hours after pickup. She tried to fine me because my Christmas lights were the wrong color temperature. She sent me a violation notice because my car was parked in my own driveway 3 nights in a row. Patricia banged her gavel. Order. This is completely inappropriate. Richard stood up. Actually, Patricia, I think we need to discuss this. I've been uncomfortable with how aggressive our enforcement has become. Sharon agreed. I've had multiple neighbors tell me they're afraid to do anything to their property without explicit permission. That's not the kind of community I want to live in. We have rules for a reason. Patricia's voice was getting shrill. Rules are meant to maintain standards, not to bully people, Richard said. I move that we suspend all pending fines pending a complete review of our enforcement policies. Second, Sharon said immediately. All in favor, Richard, Sharon, and Helen raised their hands. Deborah looked at Patricia, then slowly raised her hand as well. Patricia sat frozen, outvoted 4-1. The motion carries, Richard said. Patricia, I think we also need to discuss your conduct as president. This information about false code enforcement complaints is serious. Those were legitimate concerns about property standards. 17 complaints in 2 years, all dismissed as unfounded. That's not legitimate. That's harassment. I watched as the board turned on their president. Other homeowners voiced their complaints, a flood of grievances that had clearly been building for months. Patricia tried to maintain control, but she had lost the room. Finally, Sharon made another motion. I move that we hold a special election for HOA president within the next 30 days. Second, said Helen. This vote was unanimous, even Deborah voting against Patricia. Patricia stood up, her face red. Fine. You want to throw me out for actually caring about this neighborhood? Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when property values tank because people are putting up pink flamingos and parking boats in their driveways. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving her gavel and papers behind. The room sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Richard cleared his throat. Well, I guess I'm running this meeting now. Let's talk about getting our enforcement policies back to something reasonable. The meeting continued for another hour, and it was the most productive HOA discussion I had ever witnessed. They agreed to suspend all fines issued in the past 6 months, pending individual review. They formed a committee to revise the guidelines to be more specific and less draconian. They even apologized to me directly for the harassment. As I was leaving, several neighbors stopped to thank me for standing up to Patricia. One older gentleman shook my hand firmly. Someone needed to put her in her place. She's been terrorizing this neighborhood since she got elected. Good for you, son. I drove home feeling vindicated but also a bit unsettled. I had not meant to start a revolution just to protect my rights. But maybe the neighborhood needed it. The next morning, I found my car tires slashed. All 4 of them, clean cuts that had let the air out overnight. My security cameras had caught someone in a hooded sweatshirt approaching around 3 a.m., crouching by each tire, then leaving quickly. The person had kept their face hidden, but again, the build and height looked like Patricia. I called the police this time. This was beyond HOA drama. This was criminal damage. Officer Jennifer Mills arrived within an hour, took my statement, and reviewed the security footage. You know who might have done this? She asked. I have a strong suspicion. I explained the HOA situation, Patricia's pattern of harassment, and the board vote the previous night. Has she threatened you directly? Not in so many words, but the pattern is clear. Officer Mills made notes. The video isn't clear enough for a positive ID. We can file a report and document the damage, but without proof of who did it, it's hard to press charges. What if there were other incidents, a pattern of harassment? That could support a restraining order, but you'd need to petition the court. After she left, I called Tom again. I want to file for a restraining order. This has gone too far. You have documentation of everything. Video, emails, photos, county records, the whole thing. Send it all to me. I'll file the petition this afternoon. While I waited for roadside assistance to replace my tires, I organized everything into a chronological timeline. The tree fine, the grass violation, the house number complaint, the false code enforcement report, the slashed tires. Photos, videos, emails, and witness statements from neighbors who had seen Patricia photographing my property. Tom filed the restraining order petition that afternoon. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday, July 10th, 2 days before the scheduled HOA picnic. I spent the weekend getting quotes for tire replacement and documenting everything for insurance. I also had additional security cameras installed covering every angle of my property. If Patricia came back, I would have crystal clear video. Monday morning, I was served with papers. Patricia was suing me for slander and defamation, claiming my statements at the HOA meeting had damaged her reputation and caused her emotional distress. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I immediately forwarded it to Tom. "This is a slap suit," Tom said when he called. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to punish you for speaking out. North Carolina has anti-slap laws. We can get this dismissed and possibly recover attorney fees." "How long will that take?" "A few months probably. But don't worry about it. Focus on the restraining order hearing. That's more immediate." Tuesday, I received an email from Richard, the acting HOA president. "Marcus, just a heads up. Patricia is telling people the picnic is canceled because you're prohibiting access to the forest. I wanted you to know that's not true, and we're going to send out a community email clarifying the situation." I replied thanking him and confirming the easement agreement was in place and the picnic could proceed as planned. An hour later, the community email went out explaining that there had been a misunderstanding about forest ownership. It had been resolved amicably, and the picnic was still on. It also mentioned that Patricia was no longer speaking on behalf of the HOA board. My phone rang 5 minutes after the email went out. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "You're destroying everything I built." Patricia's voice was hysterical. "That forest was supposed to be the crown jewel of this community and you're taking it away." "I'm not taking anything away. The easement agreement lets the HOA keep using it. Under your terms, your conditions. You've turned the whole neighborhood against me. Patricia, you did that yourself by harassing everyone." I was maintaining standards. Someone has to care about property values. Caring about standards doesn't mean slashing my tires. There was a long pause. "I didn't slash your tires. My security cameras say otherwise. You can't prove anything." Her voice had changed, gotten colder. "Wednesday's hearing will determine that. Stay away from me and my property, Patricia." I hung up and immediately called Officer Mills to report the phone call. She said it would help establish a pattern of harassment. Wednesday morning arrived with dark clouds threatening rain. The restraining order hearing was at 10 a.m. at the Buncombe County Courthouse in downtown Asheville. I arrived early with Tom and all my documentation. Patricia was there with her own lawyer, a severe-looking woman in an expensive suit. Patricia had clearly spent money on representation, which told me she was taking this seriously. The hearing was before Judge William Hartley, a white-haired man in his 60s who looked like he had seen everything and was tired of most of it. Tom presented our case methodically. The timeline of harassment, the false code enforcement complaint, the video evidence of someone matching Patricia's description on my property late at night, the slashed tires, the threatening phone call. He painted a picture of escalating harassment and intimidation. Patricia's lawyer argued that everything was circumstantial. The video did not clearly show Patricia's face. The code enforcement complaint could have been filed by anyone. The phone call was just an emotional reaction to being wrongly accused. "Your Honor," her lawyer said, "my client is a dedicated community volunteer who has been vilified by Mr. Yates because she dared to enforce the rules he agreed to when he purchased his home. This is retaliation, pure and simple." Judge Hartley looked at the evidence, then at Patricia. "Mrs. Henderson, did you file a code enforcement complaint against Mr. Yates? Patricia's lawyer whispered to her. She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I believe there were legitimate violations. Were there? The code enforcement officer said no, but I thought there might be. Did you photograph Mr. Yates's property without his permission late at night? I was conducting HOA business. At 9 p.m., wearing dark clothing, Patricia's lawyer interjected. Your Honor, HOA board members are allowed to inspect properties. From the public street, perhaps. But the video shows someone walking onto Mr. Yates's driveway, which is private property. Judge Hartley looked at more documents. I also see here that you've filed 17 code enforcement complaints in 2 years, all dismissed. That suggests a pattern of misuse of public resources. I was trying to maintain community standards. By filing false reports, the judge's tone was sharp. Mrs. Henderson, I'm going to grant a temporary restraining order. You are to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. Yates and his property. No contact, direct or indirect. We'll schedule a full hearing in 30 days to determine if it should be made permanent. Patricia's face went pale. Your Honor, I live in the same neighborhood. How am I supposed to avoid him? You'll figure it out. Stay off his street. Don't attend HOA meetings he's at. Use a different route for your daily activities. If you violate this order, you'll be arrested. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. As we left the courthouse, Tom clapped me on the shoulder. That went well. The judge clearly saw through her act. She's not going to let this go. She doesn't have a choice. If she violates the restraining order, she'll face criminal charges. I wished I shared his optimism. That evening, someone posted on the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook group. The post, from an account I did not recognize, claimed I was a bully who had manipulated the HOA board and gotten an innocent volunteer banned from community meetings through false accusations. It included my address and suggested people make their feelings known. I screenshot the post and reported it to Facebook, but the damage was done. My phone started getting calls from unknown numbers. Most hung up when I answered, but a few left messages calling me various names and accusing me of ruining the neighborhood. I forwarded everything to Tom and Officer Mills. This was getting out of hand. Friday morning, 2 days before the scheduled picnic, I woke up to find graffiti spray painted on my garage door. Bully in large red letters. Security cameras caught 3 teenagers doing it around 2 a.m. I did not recognize them, but they were young, maybe 16 or 17. Definitely not Patricia herself, but possibly recruited by her or her supporters. I called the police. Officer Mills came out again, looking frustrated. Mr. Yates, this is escalating. I'm going to talk to my sergeant about increasing patrols in your area. In the meantime, you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days. I'm not leaving my home because of vandalism. I understand, but your safety is important. I'll be fine. I have good security now. After she left, I spent the morning cleaning the graffiti off my garage door. Neighbors drove by slowly, some stopping to ask if I was okay, others just staring. I was becoming a spectacle. Richard called around noon. Marcus, I heard about the graffiti. On behalf of the board, I'm sorry. This isn't who we are as a community. It's not your fault. Still, I want you to know the board is discussing additional measures. We might pursue our own restraining order against Patricia for continuing to harass residents. She's not doing this directly. She's getting other people to do it. Probably, but we can still make it clear she's not welcome at community events or meetings. The special election is next week. Once we have a new president, hopefully things will calm down. Saturday arrived, the day before the picnic. I spent most of it reviewing my security footage and documenting everything for my ongoing legal cases. Tom had filed a motion to dismiss Patricia's defamation suit under North Carolina's anti-SLAPP statute. We were waiting for a hearing date on that. Around 6 p.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed before answering. It was Deborah, the former HOA vice president. I opened the door cautiously. "Deborah, what can I do for you?" She looked nervous, glancing around like she was being followed. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you privately." I let her in, keeping the door partially open just in case this was some kind of setup. "I need to tell you something," she said, wringing her hands. "About Patricia. I should have said something sooner, but I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of her. She's not well, Marcus. Mentally, I mean. Over the past year, she's become obsessed with the HOA and controlling the neighborhood. Her husband left her about 18 months ago, and she just threw herself into the HOA presidency like it was the only thing keeping her together. That doesn't excuse harassment and vandalism. I know, but I think it's worse than you realize. She showed me plans once, architectural drawings for developing the forest. She wanted to turn it into a community center with a clubhouse and pool. She'd been talking to developers, getting estimates. She really believed it was HOA property and she could make it happen. The forest was never HOA property. She convinced herself it was, or maybe she just wanted it so badly she ignored the truth. When you showed up with proof of ownership, it destroyed her whole vision. And then when the board turned on her, she snapped. "Are you saying she's responsible for the vandalism?" Deborah hesitated. "I don't have proof, but yes, I think so. I think she's been coordinating it through her friends and their kids. There's a group of women who are still loyal to her, who think you're the villain in all this. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm worried she's going to do something worse." She called me last night, ranting about how the picnic tomorrow is going to be a disaster and it's all your fault. She said something about making sure everyone knows who the real enemy is. It scared me, Marcus. She didn't sound rational. I thanked Deborah for the warning and locked the door after she left. Then I called Officer Mills and relayed the conversation. "We can increase patrols tomorrow during the picnic," she said. "But without a specific threat, there's not much else we can do preventatively. What if she shows up and violates the restraining order? Then we can arrest her. Make sure someone calls 911 immediately if she appears." I did not sleep well that night. I kept thinking about what Patricia might do, how far she might go. Someone who had already coordinated vandalism and harassment was capable of worse. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a picnic. I debated whether to even go, but decided I should. It was my property after all, and I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. The picnic was scheduled to start at noon. I arrived at 11:30 to find families already gathering in the forest clearing. Kids ran around playing, adults set up food tables, someone was starting charcoal in the grills. It looked idyllic. Richard saw me and came over. "Marcus, glad you made it. Thanks again for working out the easement agreement. This means a lot to the community." "No problem. It's a great space. I'm glad people can enjoy it." Sharon approached with a smile. "We're planning to formally thank you during the announcements. The new board really appreciates what you did." "That's not necessary. We insist. You could have kicked us all out, but you chose to work with us instead. That deserves recognition." More families arrived. I recognized most of them from around the neighborhood, though I did not know many names yet. Several people thanked me for letting them continue using the forest. A few apologized for the harassment I had received. By 12:30, there must have been 70 or 80 people in the clearing. The smell of hamburgers and hot dogs filled the air. Kids played frisbee and soccer. It really was a lovely community event. Then Patricia arrived. She walked into the clearing from the trail, wearing sunglasses and a determined expression. Conversation stopped as people noticed her. Richard immediately pulled out his phone. I walked over to intercept her, staying about 15 feet away to avoid any accusation of contact. "Patricia, there's a restraining order. You need to leave. This is a community event. I'm a member of the community. You're violating a court order. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." Richard was already on his phone. "Yes, we need an officer at the Meadowbrook Forest area. Someone is violating a restraining order." Patricia ignored him and walked toward the center of the clearing. People moved away from her like she was radioactive. "I have something to say," she announced loudly. "You all need to know the truth about Marcus Yates." "Patricia, stop," Sharon said. "You're making this worse for yourself. He's stolen community property. That forest was meant for all of us, and he's using legal technicalities to take it away." "That's not true," I said calmly. "I own this land. I inherited it. The easement agreement lets everyone keep using it. On your terms, under your control. Don't you see what he's doing? He's manipulating all of you." A man I did not know spoke up. "Patricia, you fined him for planting trees. You harassed half the neighborhood with ridiculous violations. Maybe it's time to accept responsibility." "I was protecting our property values." "You were abusing your power," someone else said. More people voiced agreement. Patricia looked around wildly, realizing she had no support here. "You're all blind. He's turned you against me with his lies." 2 police cruisers arrived at the edge of the clearing, officers approaching quickly. I recognized Officer Mills and pointed her toward Patricia. "Mrs. Henderson, you're in violation of a restraining order. You need to come with us." Patricia's face crumpled. For a moment she looked like she might run, but there was nowhere to go. "I just wanted to save the forest," she said quietly. "Madam, please turn around and put your hands behind your back." They arrested her there in front of everyone, handcuffed her, and led her away. The clearing was silent except for the sound of birds and the distant traffic. Richard cleared his throat. "Well, let's try to get back to enjoying the day." It took a while for the mood to recover, but eventually conversations resumed and kids went back to playing. I helped serve food and tried to act normal, but my hands were shaking. Sharon came over while I was manning the hamburger grill. "That was intense. Are you okay?" I never wanted it to go this far. "She made her choices, Marcus. You just defended yourself." "I know, but still." Seeing someone arrested at a family picnic is not how I wanted this to end. Sometimes people need to face consequences before they can get help. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for her. I hope Sharon was right, but I had my doubts. The picnic wrapped up around 4 p.m. I stayed to help clean up, hauling trash bags and folding tables with other volunteers. People continued to thank me, which felt strange given how the day had gone. That evening I got a call from Tom. "I heard about the arrest. Are you okay?" "Yeah, just tired." This whole thing has been exhausting. Well, I have some potentially good news. With Patricia arrested for violating the restraining order, her defamation lawsuit against you is probably dead in the water. No judge is going to look favorably on a plaintiff who's been arrested for harassment. When will we know for sure? The hearing on our anti-SLAPP motion is in 2 weeks. I'd be shocked if it wasn't dismissed, and we'll almost certainly get attorney fees awarded. What happens to Patricia now? She'll be arraigned tomorrow, probably. Violating a restraining order is a misdemeanor. She might get probation, might get a short jail sentence depending on her record and the judge's mood. The bigger issue is the vandalism. If the police can connect her to coordinating that, she could face more serious charges. After we hung up, I sat on my back deck watching the sun set over the forest. My forest. The trees I had planted along my property line were doing well, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates looking for peace and privacy. Instead, I had found an HOA president on a power trip and ended up in a legal battle that culminated in her arrest. It was not exactly the fresh start I had envisioned after my divorce. But looking at the forest, at the home I was making my own despite the obstacles, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had stood up for myself. I had not backed down when bullied. And in the process, I had helped free an entire neighborhood from overzealous enforcement and harassment. The next few weeks were relatively quiet. Patricia was arraigned and released on bond pending trial. The restraining order was made permanent at the 30-day hearing, which she did not contest. The special HOA election resulted in Richard becoming the new president with a mandate to reform enforcement policies. The defamation lawsuit was dismissed exactly as Tom predicted, and we were awarded attorney fees. Patricia's lawyer tried to appeal, but even that was half-hearted. More significantly, Officer Mills had followed up on the vandalism investigation. The teenagers who spray-painted my garage were identified and admitted Patricia's friend, Nancy, had paid them $50 to do it. Nancy, faced with charges for conspiracy to commit vandalism and contributing to the delinquency of minors, gave a statement implicating Patricia in planning multiple acts of harassment. The district attorney added those charges to Patricia's case. Between the restraining order violation, the vandalism conspiracy, and the false code enforcement reports, she was facing up to 2 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Tom advised me that she would likely take a plea deal. They usually offer probation and restitution for first-time offenders on cases like this. She'll have a criminal record, but probably won't do serious time. What about the money she owes me for attorney fees? That's a separate judgment. We can garnish her wages if she doesn't pay voluntarily. You'll get your money eventually. 6 weeks after the picnic incident, Patricia's plea hearing was scheduled. I did not attend, but Tom did and reported back. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of violating a restraining order and 1 count of conspiracy to commit vandalism. The other charges were dropped. She got 2 years probation, a $1,000 fine, and has to pay restitution to you for the tire replacement and garage cleaning, plus our attorney fees from the defamation case. How did she seem? Honestly, broken. She made a statement apologizing to you and the neighborhood. Her lawyer mentioned she's been seeing a therapist and is on medication for anxiety and depression. I almost felt sorry for her. I did feel sorry for her in a way. She had clearly been dealing with her own issues and had channeled them into an unhealthy obsession with control. That did not excuse what she had done, but it made her seem more human, less like a cartoon villain. Life in Meadowbrook Estates gradually returned to normal. The new HOA board revised the guidelines to be clearer and more reasonable. They established an appeals process for fines and required board votes to be documented and transparent. Several residents who had been fined under Patricia's regime got their money refunded. My trees grew tall and healthy along my property line. I planted more the following spring native species that would provide habitat for birds and wildlife. Nobody complained or tried to fine me. I even started using the forest trails myself, early morning walks before work to clear my head. I ran into neighbors sometimes, and we would chat about the weather or upcoming community events. It felt like an actual community now, not a dictatorship. One morning, about 4 months after everything went down, I was walking the main trail when I encountered Deborah. We had not spoken since she warned me about Patricia's mental state. Marcus, hi. I was hoping I might run into you. Hey, Deborah, how have you been? Good, thank you. I wanted to apologize for not standing up to Patricia sooner. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I was too afraid of confrontation. I understand. She was intimidating. That's no excuse. I should have had more courage. What you did, standing up to her, it changed this neighborhood for the better. I just wanted you to know that. Thanks. I appreciate that. We walked together for a while, talking about the changes in the HOA and the upcoming fall festival the new board was planning. It felt good to have a normal conversation with a neighbor, no drama or conflict. As we parted ways near the trailhead, Deborah said something that stuck with me. You know, Patricia used to say the forest was the heart of the community. She was right about that, just wrong about everything else. Thank you for sharing it with us. Walking back to my house, I thought about that. The forest was the heart of the community, a shared space that brought people together. I could have kept it entirely private, could have gated it off after all the harassment, but that would have punished innocent people for Patricia's actions. Instead, the easement agreement meant families could keep enjoying the trails and the clearing, kids could play in nature, and the community had a gathering place. My ownership was protected, but the benefit was shared. It felt right. That evening, I sat on my deck with a beer, watching fireflies dance along the tree line. My 6 original oak saplings had grown noticeably taller, their leaves full and green. In a few years, they would provide real shade. In a few decades, they would be magnificent. I thought about everything that had happened since I planted those trees. The fines, the harassment, the legal battles, the eventual resolution. It had been stressful and expensive and exhausting, but it had also been worth it. I had learned that sometimes you have to fight for your rights, even when it is difficult. That bullies only win when good people stay silent. That communities work best when people cooperate in good faith rather than enforce rules through fear. Most importantly, I had learned that I could stand up for myself. After the divorce, after feeling beaten down and defeated, I had found my spine again. Patricia Henderson had tried to bully me into submission, and instead, I had helped free an entire neighborhood from her tyranny. My phone buzzed with an email from Richard. Marcus, wanted to give you a heads up. The Fall Festival is scheduled for October 15th in the forest clearing. We're planning a formal dedication ceremony for the space, recognizing your generosity in granting the easement. Hope you'll attend. Richard. I smiled and typed back. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. The Fall Festival turned out to be even bigger than the summer picnic. Over 100 people showed up, including families from neighboring developments who had heard about the forest trails and wanted to check them out. The weather was perfect, crisp October air with leaves showing their autumn colors. Richard had arranged for a small stage and sound system. After lunch, he called everyone together for announcements. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This is our first fall festival, and based on the turnout, I hope it becomes an annual tradition. Before we get to the activities, we have a special presentation to make. He gestured for me to join him on the stage. I climbed up, feeling self-conscious with everyone watching. Many of you know Marcus Yates, but you might not know the full story of how we almost lost access to this beautiful forest. When Marcus moved to Meadowbrook Estates last year, he discovered that this land, which we had been using for years, was actually his private property inherited from his grandfather. He would have been completely within his rights to prohibit our access. Instead, he worked with the HOA board to create an easement agreement that protects our community's ability to enjoy this space for generations to come. Marcus, on behalf of the entire neighborhood, thank you. He handed me a framed certificate declaring me an honorary lifetime member of the Meadowbrook Estates community, along with a small plaque to be mounted at the trailhead dedicating the space as the Yates Community Forest. I was genuinely touched. Thank you all. I'm just glad this space can continue bringing people together. That's what community is supposed to be about. The applause was warm and genuine. As I stepped off the stage, multiple people came up to shake my hand and thank me personally. Kids asked if they could help plant more trees in the forest. Someone suggested starting a volunteer trail maintenance group. It felt good. Really good. That evening, as I helped break down tables and pack up leftover food, Sharon approached me with a thoughtful expression. Have you ever considered running for the HOA board? We have 2 open positions this winter. I laughed. After everything that happened, I think I've had enough HOA drama for a lifetime. That's exactly why you'd be perfect. You understand what overreach looks like, and you'd make sure we stay accountable. Think about it. I promised I would, though I was not sure I meant it. As I drove home that night, I thought about how different my life was compared to a year ago. I had gone from a divorced guy trying to start over in a new neighborhood to someone who had fought an HOA president, discovered I owned a forest, and somehow become a community figure. The trees I had planted were thriving. The neighborhood was healthier without Patricia's reign of terror. And I had proven to myself that I could stand up to bullies and win. Not a bad outcome for what started as a simple desire to plant some oak trees. The winter months passed quietly. Patricia completed her probation without incident. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Charlotte to live with her sister and start fresh. I hoped therapy was helping her work through whatever issues had driven her behavior. The restitution payments came through on schedule. Between the tire replacement, garage cleaning, and attorney fees, she owed me just over $8,000. The court had ordered payment in monthly installments, and they arrived like clockwork. I put the money into a savings account, earmarked for future improvements to the forest trails. In February, Sharon asked me again about running for the HOA board. This time I said yes. The election was uncontested. Apparently, my reputation as someone who would stand up to overreach while still being reasonable was exactly what people wanted. I won easily and joined Richard and Sharon on the board. My first act as a board member was proposing we reduce our fine structure by 75% and implement a warning system for first-time minor violations. It passed unanimously. My second act was suggesting we use some of our reserve funds to build a proper parking area for forest access, with a small informational kiosk about the native plants and wildlife. The community loved it. By the time summer rolled around again, Meadowbrook Estates felt like a completely different place. People actually talked to their neighbors. Kids played outside without fear of generating violation notices. The forest trails were busy every weekend with families enjoying nature. The annual summer picnic was bigger than ever. Standing in the clearing, watching kids play and adults laugh and share food, I felt genuinely content. This was what I had hoped for when I moved here: community, connection, and peace. My oak trees along the property line were now taller than me, their branches spreading wide. In a few more years, they would provide the shade I had envisioned when I planted them. They would probably outlive me, a living reminder that sometimes the simple act of putting roots down in the ground can change everything. As the sun set on that perfect summer evening, Richard raised his beer in a toast. To Marcus, for planting trees and growing a community. Everyone raised their drinks and cheered. I clinked my beer against his and smiled. To knowing when to fight and when to share, and to always reading the fine print on property deeds. The laughter that followed was warm and genuine, the sound of a neighborhood that had learned its lessons and come out stronger. My 6 oak trees rustled in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the forest, I swear I could hear my grandfather laughing.